This is the True Crime Nation podcast with your hosts, Todd and Brian.
If you're enjoying the show
or have suggestions for future shows, you can email us at truecrimenation@outlook.com. And as always, let's start the show. Welcome back to the True Crime Nation podcast. This is Brian, and right over there with me, as always, is my co-host Todd. What's up, buddy?
Hey, man, what's going on over there with you?
Well, you know, same old, same old.
Getting ready to do another, a different kind of crime episode today.
Yeah,
this one, a strange
weird.
one.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if this one's really a crime or what happened, but we'll dig into it and find out what this situation. Basically, it's about a guy they found on the beach dead, and I don't know much more than that. They don't know how he died, what happened, how he got there, and there's nothing explaining. It just doesn't make sense what's going on with the situation. So,
right, it's pretty weird.
We'll just jump into it and see what happens.
Yes, we will. All right, ready?
What do you got? Yeah, what do you got for us?
All right, the body on Somerton Beach. Most murders aren't difficult to solve. The husband did it, the wife did it, the boyfriend did it, or the ex-boyfriend did it. The crimes fit a pattern, the motives are generally clear. Of course, there are always a handful of cases that don't fit the template, where the killer is a stranger or the reason for the killing is bizarre. It's fair to say, however, that nowadays the authorities usually have something to go on. Thanks in part to advances such as DNA technology, the police are seldom baffled anymore. They certainly were baffled, though, in Adelaide, the capital of South Australia, in December 1948. That was a while ago. I didn't realize it was that long ago. And the only thing that seems to have changed since then is that a story that began simply with the discovery of a body on the beach on the first day of that southern summer has become ever more mysterious. In fact, this case, which remains theoretically at least an active investigation, is so opaque that we still do not know the victim's identity, have no idea what killed him, and cannot even be certain whether his death was murder or suicide.
That's so interesting. They don't know who this guy is. They can't figure out who this guy was.
And it just gets weirder and weirder. I think I saw this on somewhere else. I don't remember what it was on, but this thing just gets weirder and weirder as it goes.
Let's see if we can put something together with it. Maybe.
What we can say is that the clues in the Somerton Beach mystery, or the enigma of the unknown man and his known down under, add up to one of the world's most perplexing cold cases. It may be the most mysterious of them all. Let's start by sketching out the little that is known for certain. At 7 o'clock on the warm evening of Tuesday, November 30th, 1948, jeweler John Bain Lyons and his wife went for a stroll on Somerton Beach, a seaside resort a few miles south of Adelaide. As they walked toward Glen Elg, they noticed a smartly dressed man lying on the sand, his head propped against a seawall. He was lolling about 20 yards from them, legs outstretched, feet crossed. As the couple watched, the man extended his right arm upward, then let it fall back to the ground. Lyons thought he might be making a drunken attempt to smoke a cigarette. Half an hour later, another couple noticed the same man lying in the same position. Looking on him from above, the woman can see that he was immaculately dressed in a suit, with smart shoes polished to a mirror shine. Odd clothing for the beach. He was motionless, his left arm splayed out on the sand. The couple decided that he was simply asleep, his face surrounded by mosquitoes. He must be dead to the world not to notice them, the boyfriend joked. Yeah, he was dead to the world, all right.
Yeah, he sure was.
It was not until the next morning that it became obvious that the man was not so much dead to the world as actually dead. John Lyons returned from a morning swim to find some people clustered at the seawall where he had seen his drunk the previous evening. Walking over, he saw a figure slumped in much the same position, head resting on the seawall, feet crossed. Now, though, the body was cold. There were no marks of any sort of violence. A half-smoked cigarette was lying on the man's collar, as though it had fallen from his mouth. The body reached the Royal Adelaide Hospital 3 hours later. There, Dr. John Barclay Bennett put the time of death to no earlier than 2 a.m. Noted the likely cause of death as heart failure, sorry. Noted the likely cause of death as heart failure and added he suspected poisoning. The contents of the man's pockets were spread out on a table. Tickets from Adelaide to the beach, a pack of chewing gum, some matches, 2 combs, and a pack of Army Club cigarettes containing 7 cigarettes of 2 combs and a pack of Army Club cigarettes containing 7 cigarettes of another, more expensive brand called Cansitas. There was no wallet and no cash and no ID. None of the man's clothes bore any name tags. Indeed, in all but one case, the marker's label had been carefully snipped away. One trouser pocket had been neatly repaired with an unusual variety of orange thread. By the time a full autopsy was carried out a day later, the police had already exhausted their best leads as to the dead man's identity. And the results of the postmen did little to enlighten them. And the results of the post-mortem did little to enlighten them. It threatened that the corpse's pupils were smaller than normal and unusual, that a dribble of spittle had run down the side of the man's mouth as he lay, and that he was probably unable to swallow it. His spleen, meanwhile, was distended with congested blood. In the man's stomach, pathologist Don Dwyer found the remains of his last meal. All right. So this guy's got nothing on him.
Yeah, he's got no IDs, which tells me he's got all of his other stuff, typical stuff that a guy would have back in the 1940s, right? Couple combs, some cigarettes, some gum, whatever have you. But no ID. No
Nope.
ID. Strange. No wallet. So
No wallet.
And I guess back in the day, they put your names on suits if they tailored them for you. That tag was removed as well. So someone did not want this man to be known
Didn't
who he
want
was.
nobody knowing who he was, whether it was him or whether it was whoever killed him.
Right, but he would have his ID on him, would he not? I don't know what they carried back in 1948 for ID or what they had to prove. If they did they have IDs back then?
I'd imagine they had driver's
Sure, they
licenses
did.
and
They had
stuff.
something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, it sounds to me there was some foul play. Somebody just didn't want this guy identified for whatever reason.
Right. All right.
That's what I'm gathering so far.
That's what I'm getting. So let's see. The remains of his last meal were a pasty.
A pasty?
And a further quantity of blood.
What's a pasty? Is that an English thing?
Pasty is just like a meat-filled pastry thing. Yeah.
Like an empanada.
Kind of. Yeah. A further quantity of blood. Okay. That's gross. That too suggested poisoning, though there was nothing to show that the poison had been in the food. Now the dead man's peculiar behavior on the beach, slumping in a suit, raising and dropping his right arm, seemed less like drunkenness than it did a lethal dose of something taking slow effect. But repeated tests on both blood and organs by an expert chemist failed to reveal the faintest trace of a poison. I was astounded that he found nothing, Dwyer admitted at the inquest. In fact, no cause of death was found. The body displayed other peculiarities. The dead man's calf muscles were high and very well developed. Although in his late 40s he had legs of an athlete, his toes, meanwhile, were oddly wedge-shaped. One expert who gave evidence at the inquest noted, I have not seen the tendency of calf muscles to pronounced as in this case. His feet were rather striking, suggesting, this is my own assumption, that he had been in the habit of wearing high-heeled and pointed shoes. Perhaps another expert witness hazarded the dead man had been a ballet dancer. The mystery gets even stranger after the jump. So, That'd be weird.
So no poison. Do you think that back in 1940, well, obviously they didn't have the technology they do now, but do you think they could have just not detected something due to the technology?
That would be my guess. I mean, cyanide, they say, is almost impossible to detect
I was
unless
going
you
to say there's
know.
something that you can't detect, right? There's a
Mhm.
couple out there that's almost undetectable. Is it ricin or something like that? It's hard to detect too.
Yeah, there's a few of them, but I don't know what all. I know cyanide is one of them. The one you just said, I think, is one of them.
Ricin.
There might be a couple more,
I
but
only know that from Breaking Bad. I mean, that's.
right.
I think I'm saying it right. Ricin.
I don't know. Probably. Um, all this left the Adelaide coroner, Thomas Cleland, with a real puzzle on his hands. The only practical solution, he was informed by an eminent professor, Sir Cedric Stanton Hicks, was that a very rare poison had been used, one that decomposed very early after death, leaving no trace. The only poisons capable of this were so dangerous and deadly that Hicks would not say their names aloud in open court. Instead, he passed Cleland a scrap of paper on which he had written the names of two possible candidates, Digitalis and Strophanthin. Hicks suspected the latter, Strophathin, is a rare glycoside derived from the seeds of some African plants. Historically, it was used by a well known Somali tribe to poison arrows.
Hmm. Interesting.
Interesting. Hmm. More baffled than ever now, the police continued their investigation. A full set of fingerprints was taken and circulated throughout Australia and then throughout the English speaking world. No one could identify them. People from all over Adelaide were escorted to the mortuary in the hope they could give the corpse a name. Some thought they knew the man from photos published in the newspaper, others were the distraught relatives of missing persons. Not one recognized the body.
Hmm.
By January 11th, the South Australia police had investigated and dismissed pretty much every lead they had. The investigation was now widened in an attempt to locate any abandoned personal possessions, perhaps left luggage that might suggest that the dead man had come from out of state. This meant checking every hotel, dry cleaner, lost property office, and a railway station for miles around. But it did not produce results. On the 12th, detectives sent the man. On the 12th, detectives sent to the main railway station in Adelaide more shown, or on the 12th, detectives sent to the main railway station in Adelaide were shown a brown suitcase that had been deposited in the cloakroom there on November 30th. Hmm.
So I'm wondering if, well, we'll go into this, but nowadays they could have identified this guy, I think.
I think
Probably.
so too. Yeah.
Did it
I
talk
think in
about what,
1948 they were still pretty.
yeah, what
Mhm.
was this guy? Maybe to tell it down the road, it didn't really say. Was he in drunk? Was he intoxicated? Did he have alcohol in his system?
They haven't said
Okay.
if they detected it. They didn't say.
I mean, he could
This,
have been a case of a bunch of guys sitting at a bar, don't know each other, start drinking shots, getting wasted, hammered. The guy's so drunk he doesn't even know where he's at. They take his wallet and they walk him out to the beach and lay him against a rock to pass out, not thinking he's going to die, and he dies of alcohol poisoning. Right?
that could be
Probably not
too,
what happened.
but probably not because you would think somebody would eventually come forward and say something.
You would, but you never know.
Yeah. The staff could remember nothing about the owner, and the case's contents were not much more revealing. The case did contain a reel of orange thread identical to that used to repair the dead man's trousers, but painstaking care had been applied to remove practically every trace of the owner's identity. The case bore no stickers or markings, and a label had been torn off from the inside. The tags were missing from all but 3 items of the clothing inside. Those bore the name Keen or T. Keen, but it proved impossible to trace anyone of that name. And the police concluded in Adelaide newspaper reported that someone had purposely left them on, knowing that the dead man's name was not Keen or Keen.
I wonder if this dude was a foreigner, coming to Australia from wherever, not really known to anybody.
That's what I'm thinking. But why was he there?
New life, maybe?
Maybe trying to
Business?
get away from something.
Running from the mob?
Maybe a spy.
There you go. That's a good point.
The remainder of the contents were equally inscrutable. There was a stencil kit of the sort used by the third officer on merchant ships responsible for the stenciling of cargo, a table knife with the haft cut down, and a coat stitched using a feather stitch unknown in Australia. A tailor identified the stitchwork as an American in origin, suggesting that the coat and perhaps its wearer had traveled during the war years. But searches of shipping and immigration records from across the country again produced no likely leads. So, according to them, the coat was made in America.
Mm-hmm.
So, we'll say American.
Hard to say. You would want to
Mhm.
think that, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But why would somebody not want his identity known? I mean, I get it.
Again, if he
If you're
was
going to kill
into,
somebody, but what?
depends on what he was into.
I mean, if this was a mob job, they probably wouldn't have found his body, right?
That'd be my guess.
They wouldn't just leave
Unless
him
they were
laying
trying to send
somewhere.
a message.
Maybe. So much open to this thing, man. You just don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The police had brought in another expert, John Cleland, emeritus professor of pathology at the University of Adelaide, to re-examine the corpse and the dead man's possessions. In April, 4 months after discovery of the body, Cleland's search produced a final piece of evidence, one that would prove to be the most baffling of all. Cleland discovered a small pocket sewn into the waistband of the dead man's trousers. Previous examiners had missed it, and several accounts of the case had referred to it as a secret pocket, but it seems to have been intended to hold a fob watch. Was that a pocket watch?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm going to say so.
Inside, tightly rolled, was a minute scrap of paper which opened up and proved to contain 2 words typeset in an elaborate print script. The phrase read, "Tamam Shud."
Okay.
Frank Kennedy, the police reporter for the Adelaide Advertiser, recognized the words as Persian and telephoned the police to suggest they obtain a copy of a book of poetry, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. This work, written in the 12th century, had become popular in Australia during the war years in a much-loved translation by Edward Fitzgerald. All right, so that's weird. What do those words mean, and
Yeah,
why do we have them in his pocket?
what did they say it was? It was what kind of writing?
Persian.
Persian. Okay.
It existed in numerous editions, but the usual intricate police inquiries to libraries, publishers, and bookshops failed to find one that matched the fancy type. At least it was possible, however, to say that the words Tamam Shud or Taman Shud or should, as several newspapers misprinted it, a mistake perpetuated ever since. did come from Khayyam's romantic reflections on life and mortality. They were, in fact, the last words in most English translations. Not surprisingly, because the phrase means it is ended. Hmm.
I just looked it up. I looked it up on Google, and that's what it says. It's a Persian phrase meaning ended or finished. So that's interesting.
That's very interesting.
This guy has a note in his pocket, in a secret pocket that says it's done. So somebody's told him, hey, we've done the job. Whatever you needed, it's done. Why else would he be carrying a note that said that? You know,
Exactly.
unless he was
Did
going
they
to give
put
it
it
to
there, though, or did
somebody.
he put it there? That's the question.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it does get weirder and weirder as we go.
I told you. Taken at face value, this new clue suggested that the death might be a case of suicide. In fact, the South Australian police never did turn their missing person inquiries into a full-blown murder investigation. But the discovery took them no closer to identifying the dead man, and in the meantime, his body had begun to decompose. Arrangements were made for a burial, but conscious that they were disposing of one of the few pieces of evidence they had, the police first had the corpse embalmed and the cast taken of the head and upper torso. After that, the body was buried, sealed under concrete in a plot of dry ground, specifically chosen in case it became necessary to exhume it. As late as 1978, flowers would be found at odd intervals on the grave, but no one could ascertain who had left them there or why. That's, yeah, weird. In July, fully 8 months after the investigation had begun, the search for the right Rubaiyat produced results. On the 23rd, a Glenelg man walked into the detective office in Adelaide with a copy of the book and a strange story. Excuse me. Early the previous December, just after the discovery of the unknown body, he had gone for a drive with his brother-in-law in a car he kept parked a few hundred yards from the Somerton beach. The brother-in-law had found a copy of the Rubaiyat lying on the floor of the rear seats. Each man had silently assumed it belonged to the other, and the book had sat in the glove compartment ever since. Alerted by a newspaper article about the search, the two men had gone back to take a closer look. They found that part of the final page had been torn out, together with Khayyam's final words. They went to the police. All right, so this is where again, I told you this thing gets weirder and weirder as we go. So this guy and his brother-in-law or whatever find this book in his car a couple months later.
Yeah.
Really?
With those letters were
That
torn out
right
of a book.
phrase torn out.
The
Yep.
end. It was the end.
Yep.
And it was in his pocket.
Yep.
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I'm almost wondering if this wasn't suicide now. I don't know. Did he take something? And I don't know.
I don't know, but why? Why would he?
Right.
If it's
Why would he go there and do it?
Most people do suicide, leave a note of some kind.
And why would he go to Australia to do it?
Right.
If he wasn't from there, you know?
Exactly. Detective Sergeant Lionel Lean took a close look at the book. Almost at once, he found a telephone number penciled on the rear cover. Using a magnifying glass, he dimly made out the faint impression of some other letters written in capitals underneath. Here, at least, is a solid clue to go on. The phone number was unlisted, but it proved to belong to a young nurse who lived near Somerton Beach. Like the two Glenelg men, she has never been publicly identified. The South Australian police of 1949 were disappointingly willing to protect witnesses embarrassed to be linked to the case. And she is now known only by her nickname, Justin. Reluctantly, it seemed, perhaps because she was living with the man who would become her husband, the nurse admitted that she had indeed presented a copy of the Rubaiyat to a man she had known during the war. She gave the detective his name, Alfred Boxall. At last, the police felt confident that they had solved the mystery. Boxall surely was the unknown man's name. Boxall surely was the unknown man. Within the days, they traced his home to Maroubra, New South Wales.
Okay, well, they
So
got it figured out then.
if that was the guy, then he was Australian. But if that wasn't the guy, somebody's throwing some. They're doing like the old bait and switch. They're doing like that. Oh, look over here, and then doing something over here.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
There's something up with this. This wasn't just a cut and dry, this guy died on the beach case.
Right.
Some mischievousness is going on here.
The problem was that Boxall turned out to still be alive, and he still had the copy of the Rubaiyat Justin had given him.
Wow, I've never even heard of that book. Maybe I should read it.
I probably wouldn't. It's probably nothing we'd like to get into.
Yeah, probably not.
It bore the nurse's inscription, but was completely intact. The scrap of paper hidden in the dead man's pocket must have come from somewhere else. It might have helped if the South Australian police had felt able to question Justin closely, but it is clear that they did not. The gentle probing that the nurse received did yield some intriguing bits of information. Interviewed again, she recalled that sometime the previous year, she could not be certain of the date, she had come home to be told by neighbors that an unknown man had called and asked for her. And confronted with the cast of the dead man's face, Justin seemed completely taken aback, to the point of giving the appearance she was about to faint. Leanne said she seemed to recognize the man, yet firmly denied that he was anyone she knew.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's full of shit.
Yeah.
And the Australian police are a joke. At least back then.
Back then, yeah.
That left the faint impression Sergeant Leanne had noticed in the Glendale Rubaiyat. Examined under ultraviolet light, 5 lines of jumbled letters could be seen, the second of which had been crossed out. The first 3 were separated from the last 2 by a pair of straight lines with an X written over them. It seemed that there was some sort of code. Breaking a code from only a small fragment of text is exceedingly difficult, but the police did their best. They sent the message to Naval Intelligence, home to the finest cipher experts in Australia, and allowed the message to be published in the press. This produced a frenzy of amateur code breaking, almost all of it worthless. And a message from the Navy concluded that the code appeared unbreakable. So that gives me even more idea that he was a spy.
Yeah, very well could have been. Sounds like he's leaning that way. And he was caught and dealt with.
Right.
But again, why would they leave his body this way? I don't understand that.
Again, unless they're leaving a message. From the manner in which lines have been represented as being set out in the original, it is evident that the end of each line indicates a break in sense. There is an insufficient number of letters for definite conclusions to be based on analysis, but the indications, together with the acceptance of the above breaks in sense, indicate, insofar as can be seen, that the letters do not constitute any of simple cipher or code. The frequency of the occurrence of letters, whilst inconclusive, corresponds more favorably with the table of frequencies of initial letters of words in English than with any other table. Accordingly, a reasonable explanation would be that the lines are the initial letters of words of a verse of poetry or such like. And there, to all intents and purposes, the mystery rested. The Australian police never cracked the code or identified the unknown man. Justin died a few years ago without revealing why she had seemed likely to faint when confronted with the likeness of the dead man's face. And when the South Australian coroner published the final results of his investigation in 1958, his report concluded the admission, I am unable to say who the deceased was. I am unable to say how he died or what was the cause of death.
So what are you able to say? Right. No.
He's able to say that he doesn't know what the hell's going on. That's what he's able to say.
I'm surprised they haven't dug this dude back up. Why don't they dig this guy back up? They can figure this out now.
Yeah,
Can they not?
You would think. You would think.
It's just not that big of a deal to them. They don't care.
Unless
I think I know what's going on
a
here.
foreign government of some kind, not saying which one, got a hold of him and said, let it go.
That's exactly what I was thinking. If he was a
Mhm.
spy, nobody wants to know about it, and they don't want
Right.
anybody knowing.
Right.
It's
They
like if
have
you get caught, we don't know you. You're on your own,
exactly. Yep.
right? And he
Exactly
got
right.
caught, and he got left for dead, and he was
Yep.
exposed purposely, hoping that they would find out who he was, and maybe
Right.
whoever did this to him. But again, they took all of his ID. Maybe he didn't have ID
Maybe he didn't have it with
because
him
he
to
was a
begin with.
spy.
Right. Right. So
That
maybe
makes more
wherever
sense
he
to me.
was, he didn't take anything with him.
Right. That makes more sense to me. And
Mhm.
him having a demise as he did. Yeah, if you're a spy and people are onto you, shit's gonna go down, right?
And if that's what he was doing, then he could have obviously gotten into Australia without any of his paperwork. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah. So
Or he got there and got rid of it. Who knows? But that's what it sounds like to me. This guy was involved in some government stuff.
that's what I'm thinking.
Because why did they let it go? They would have. You know how it is nowadays. I mean, if you
Oh
can
yeah,
solve a
they would
murder
be.
case, you're going to solve a
Yeah.
murder, a death, right?
Yeah.
They would dig this
Well,
guy up.
especially like I said at the beginning, that it's still an open case.
It doesn't
So
have to be.
right.
We have DNA. We have all this technology now. We can pull about anybody out of the ground. We can tell you who they were, what they did, what they ate for their last meal, who they were related to. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think they want people to know who this guy was because
I don't think so either. That's what I think.
he was probably a loner, didn't have much of a family, fell into the line of work, which was perfect for him, and met his demise, and that was it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going with.
Mm-hmm.
There, case solved. We did one. We did
We
it.
did it. Boom, boom. So now, if anybody from the government's listening, we got you.
Yeah, we know we're on to you. Might as well admit it.
That's right. Just come out and say it. Although in recent years, though, the Tamon Shud case has begun to attract new attention. Amateur sleuths have probed at the loose ends left by the police, solving one or two minor mysteries, but often creating new ones in their stead, which is what we just did.
Yep.
And two especially persistent investigators, retired Australian police Gary Feltis, author of the only book yet published on the case, and Professor Derek Abbott of the University of Adelaide, have made particularly useful progress. Both freely admit that they have not solved the mystery. But let's close by looking briefly at the remaining puzzles and leading theories.
Okay.
First, the man's identity remains unknown. That's proven. It is generally presumed that he was known to Justin and may well have been, that's the nurse,
Yep.
and may well have been the man who called at her apartment, which most likely was. But even if it was not, the nurse's shocked response when confronted with the body cast was telling. Yep. Might the solution be found in her activities during World War II? Was she in the habit of presenting men friends with copies of the Rubaiyat? And if so, might the dead man have been a former boyfriend or more, whom she did not wish to confess to knowing? So, possibly during the war, she was probably a contact of his.
Right. What's up with that
And
book, though?
I don't
Was
know.
was
I
that
don't
a
know.
popular book back then?
I had never heard of it until I saw this story, so I have no idea.
I'm gonna Google it and see what it says.
Abbott's researchers certainly suggested as much. As for he has traced Justin's identity and discovered that she had a son. Minute analysis of the surviving photos of the unknown man and Justin's child reveals intriguing similarities. Might the dead man have been the father of the son? If so, could he have killed himself when told he could not see them? Or could the man living with her at the time, who she then married shortly after, killed him?
Hmm.
Hmm.
So I'm
Those
looking
who
up
argue.
here. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm looking up here the Rubaiyat. It looks like it's maybe a collection of poems
Yeah, I
written
think that's
by
what it says.
Omar Khayyam,
Yeah,
and Edward Fitzgerald gave the title translation when he translated
right.
from Persian to English.
Yeah, that's what it said.
Okay. Interesting. Why would you
But
be giving
why?
out poems? Did
Yeah,
they have special meanings in them?
maybe, maybe, maybe.
This one's weird, man. You got
I
a
know.
strange death. You got a book thing going on here. You got
Mhm,
a nurse that's involved in something, and maybe espionage, spy,
mhm. I
government.
told you.
Huh.
I told you we had a weird one here.
Yeah.
Those who argue against this theory point to the cause of the man's death. How credible is it, they say, that someone could commit suicide by dosing himself with a poison of real rarity, digitalis, and even strophathin, can be had from pharmacies, but never off the shelf. Both poisons are muscle relaxants used to treat heart disease. The apparently toxic nature of the death suggests to these theories that the unknown man was possibly a spy.
There you go.
Alfred Boxall had worked in intelligence during the war, and the unknown man died. After all, at the onset of the Cold War, and at the time when the British rocket testing facility at Woomera, a few hundred miles from Adelaide, was one of the most secret bases in the world. It has even been suggested that poison was administered to him via his tobacco. Might this
Mm-hmm.
explain the mystery of why his Army Club pack contains 7 Consitas cigarettes? Far
Yeah. Why
fetched as
would you?
this seems, there are 2 more genuinely odd things about the mystery of Tamachud that point away from anything so mundane as suicide. So,
Why would you have a pack of mixed cigarettes?
yeah, especially when one is the cheapo Army Club cigarettes, and then
Unless
there's
he just
6 or 7 of the fancy ones in there.
makes me wonder this. I wonder if those certain cigarettes were poisoned. Maybe he knew. I think that's what happened because the guy said there was a cigarette on his he was smoking a cigarette when he died.
Right, and it felt like it fell out of his mouth.
Yeah. So if he's smoking a cigarette, or maybe they just put one in his mouth and lit it. Who knows? But if the guy
And that's
had a pack
probably
of cigarettes,
what that last when that jeweler saw him put his hand up and then flop it down
Yep.
like
That
he
was
was
his
trying to smoke a
last.
cigarette, which is
Yep.
probably what he was doing.
Maybe he knew they were poisonous, and those were the ones that were deadly, and he was going to smoke one, and that was it. And he had been found out.
Or
He
he
had to
didn't know until he took his first drag and he was like, "Oh, that's not good."
could be. They could have been put in there. They could have been put there, and he didn't even know it. Let's go grab
Yep,
one, light it up. You don't look at it, make sure this
exactly.
is I better make sure this is a Marlboro light
Make
on my
sure this is
Marlboro
the
light
right
pack.
one I'm smoking.
Might this puppy up here. So yeah, I'm thinking definitely
Yep,
spy. He was definitely
I think
involved
so
in some
too.
spy espionage kind of thing.
I think so too, especially seeing at the end there that military base was not far from there.
I think
So,
the guy, here's what I'm thinking. I think the guy was a spy. He got in some trouble. He had those cigarettes for specific reasons, either to do it to himself. You know how it goes, like James Bond movies. Don't they give him like a thing he can kill himself if he needs, or you know how this
a
spies think of it.
cyanide tablet, yeah, but
They give you a cyanide tablet, and you can take it and you die if you need to, so you can't be tortured anymore.
I don't think he would. I don't think
So maybe this guy was like, I'm gonna die. These guys are gonna kill me, but I'm gonna go my way. I'm gonna set out here on the beach. They'll find my body and they can figure out what the hell happened. Yada yada yada.
Yeah, maybe. That's one theory. Yeah, that's one theory. That's
I'm
good.
still curious about this book and why it was
Yeah, why was she giving it out to these guys?
popular, and why did he tear that out?
It had to have. It had to be something she gave to her contacts to know that she was the one they were supposed to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be my
Yep.
guess.
Had to be a key.
Because she gave it to the other guy too, that Boxall guy.
I wonder if they even showed his picture out in the newspapers and stuff to people to recognize him. You think they did that? I mean, he's got to have some kind of family somewhere. Maybe they didn't know what he was involved in.
They might have. I think we should look and see if they have one.
Maybe
I
they
don't
didn't.
know why they wouldn't.
But it makes sense as to why they wouldn't dig this guy back up and figure out who he was. They don't want.
Right.
Somebody doesn't want him to.
Exactly.
This guy was definitely a spy or involved in spy kind of stuff. And that's why he met his demise. We're calling it, right? We're calling it.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's exactly what it was.
He was a spy and he was poisoned either by himself or by someone.
Yep.
And I'm not wondering if he didn't do it to himself, but makes sense. It makes sense that he didn't have ID on him. He was untraceable. You don't want people to know who you are if you're a spy. You have no identity. So,
right. And at the time that the rocket testing facility, which was one of the most secret bases in the world at the time, was not far from there. So
sure does tie up together a little bit.
Yeah, he was down there doing something.
So, listeners, if you guys think you might have an idea what happened, let us know. Get a hold of us. Reach out to us. What's that email address, Brian?
truecrimenation@outlook.com.
And let us know what you guys think. And give us your opinion on stuff. And if there's a case out there, an unsolved, mysterious
kind of mystery, something.
Yeah, that you guys want to hear, have us talk about, and try to figure things out with, let us know. We'll be happy to do it.
Send it to us. Let us know. We'll definitely do it. We'll look into it and do it. We're also on Facebook. We're also on Instagram. So just look us up, True Crime Nation.
Yep, check us out.
Instagram is true_crime nation.
Yeah, so we'll leave it at that. We'll hope that this spy case ends up being put to rest somehow, some way. But that's my theory. That's our theory, right? So,
yep.
That's listeners, thanks for listening. Brian, thanks for being here with me today again, man.
Always
good episode.
Fun. Always fun and always sometimes confusing.
I'll re-edit this. I'll re-edit this. But listeners, thanks for listening, and remember,
monsters are real.
Cool.